There is a type of person who used to cry in the bathroom of every party they attended, who absorbed strangers' grief like a sponge dropped in a dark ocean, who said yes so many times they forgot what their own no even sounded like. The world called them sensitive, the world called them too much, the world called them weak. And then, something happened. Nobody saw it coming, not their closest friends, not their family, not even the people who hurt them the most. Because it didn't happen loudly. It didn't arrive with a declaration, a manifesto, or a dramatic speech. It arrived in silence. Carl Jung, the man who mapped the hidden architecture of the human soul more precisely than anyone before or since, spent his entire life studying the chambers of the psyche that most people never find. And in that map there is a stage that almost no one talks about. A stage so rare, so psychologically profound, that Jung compared the journey toward it to alchemy, the ancient process of turning the heaviest lead into pure gold. The stage his followers came to call the Sophia stage. And when an empath, a true empath, finally reaches it, they don't just heal. They don't just recover. They become something the world has absolutely no framework for. Not dangerous like a weapon, dangerous like a mirror, the kind that shows you exactly who you are, whether you were ready to see it or not. This video is for the empaths who survived themselves, who are still surviving, and who are standing at the edge of becoming something they cannot yet name. Stay with me. Before we can understand the Sophia stage, we need to be very precise about who the empath actually is. Not the Instagram version, not the Crystal Collection spiritual awakening version, the Jungian version. Because Jung would tell you, the empath is not simply a nice person. The empath is a person with a wound that became a window. In Jungian psychology, the empath carries what he described as the wounded healer archetype, a psychological pattern so ancient that it predates written history. In shamanic traditions from Siberia to the Andes, in the healing temples of ancient Greece, in the medicine circles of the First Nations, the healer was always the one who had descended into the underworld first. The healer was always the one who had suffered the most precisely. And here is why this is not poetry, it is mechanism. Modern neuroscience has now caught up to what Jung intuited. Research on mirror neurons, first mapped by Italian neuroscientist Giacomo Rizzolatti, reveals that some individuals possess hyperactive mirroring systems. Their brains literally simulate the emotional states of others inside their own nervous systems, in real time, without permission, without filter. Empaths are not imagining what you feel. They are experiencing a neurological echo of it in their own bodies. Now carry that truth back to childhood. Imagine being 5 years old and walking into a room and feeling your mother's unspoken depression settle over you like a fog you cannot name. Imagine being 12 and knowing, with a certainty you cannot justify, that your parents' marriage is dying, months before anyone says a word. Imagine being 22, sitting in a meeting, utterly unable to concentrate because you can feel your colleague's silent panic radiating across the table like heat. No one prepared you for this, no one explained it, no one ever said, your nervous system is built differently, this gift needs a container or it will consume you. So you did what every unguided empath does. You managed it. You became the peacemaker, the helper, the one who always seemed to know what everyone around them needed. You built your entire identity, your entire persona, in Jung's language, around your capacity to soothe, to stabilize, to serve. And for a long time it worked. Until it didn't. Jung wrote something that I want you to hold. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. For an empath, complete self-acceptance requires facing the one thing they have been most afraid of since childhood. Their own darkness. Every human being, Jung said, has what he called the shadow. The shadow is the hidden basement of the psyche, where everything you were forced to reject about yourself was stored, not destroyed, not resolved, simply locked away. The anger you were told was inappropriate, the ambition you were taught was selfish, the hunger for recognition you learned to feel ashamed of, the boundaries you abandoned to be loved, the power you were punished for showing. The shadow is not evil. Jung was absolutely clear on this. He wrote, the shadow is 90% pure gold. But for the empath, this is critical. The shadow is uniquely dangerous territory. Because empaths are trained from their earliest years to direct their entire awareness outward, toward others' needs, toward others' pain, toward the emotional weather in every room they enter. And in that endless outward focus, they become strangers to their own interior world. They help everyone else process their darkness while their own darkness sits untouched in the basement. Growing, accumulating, organizing. And then the shadow finds a way out anyway. Jung called this unconscious projection, and it is the most elegant, most devastating trap the psyche ever builds. The empath who has never integrated their rage, they will unconsciously attract the person who rages for them, the one who does loudly what the empath cannot allow themselves to do at all. The narcissist, the emotional abuser, the controller who mistakes their silence for permission. The empath who was never allowed to be too much, they are drawn magnetically, inexplicably toward the chaotic person who is everything, dramatic, consuming, overwhelming. Jung said something that should stop you cold if you've ever asked the question. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. How many times have you said it? I don't know why I keep attracting the same kind of person. That is not bad luck. That is your shadow speaking. Now here is where the path towards Sophia begins, and it begins in the most unwanted way imaginable. There comes a moment in many empaths' lives, usually after a devastating betrayal, a total relationship collapse, or a complete nervous system breakdown, when the old strategy simply stops working. The mask breaks. Jung called this the collapse of the persona. The persona, the social mask we build to survive, for empaths is almost always the same mask, the helper, the giver, the selfless one. The care within it is real, but the mask itself has also been a fortress, keeping the world's needs inside and the empath's own soul out. When it breaks, and it will break, the empath faces the most terrifying moment of their psychological life. Jung described it, beneath the surface, a person is suffering from a deadly boredom that makes everything feel meaningless and empty. This is the moment the self casts its shadow. The great emptiness, the dark night of the soul, the moment you realize you have given everything to everyone and have arrived at nothing. And at that crossroads, most people make one of two choices. They rebuild the mask faster, tighter, more convincing than before. Or they go down. Down into the unconscious, down into everything they've been running from, down into the place Jung called the underworld of the psyche. The descent stops feeling poetic, it starts feeling personal. The empaths who choose to go down, who choose to face what has been living in the dark, they begin the journey toward Sophia. Jung mapped the process of becoming whole, he called it individuation, and he said it was the central task of a human lifetime. Not finding love, not building wealth, not earning recognition. Becoming whole. He described it moving through three profound phases. The first phase is shadow integration, confronting everything you have hidden from yourself. Jung called this the apprentice piece. It is where the empath finally admits the anger is real, the resentment is real, the hunger for things beyond self-sacrifice is real, and those things are not shameful, they are human. The second phase is integrating the anima, the inner opposite. For an empath already deeply feeling, already profoundly receptive, this phase means something very specific. It means integrating what they have never been allowed to be, sovereign, authoritative, firmly bounded, capable of watching someone suffer and not rushing to remove the suffering. Jung called this integration the masterpiece of the individuation process, far harder than shadow work. Because the shadow is what you've rejected, the anima is what you've never yet become. And here is where something extraordinary happens in the life of the empath. The empath who always apologized stops apologizing. The empath who always over-explained stops explaining. The empath who spent a lifetime reassuring others becomes comfortable sitting in the discomfort of others without fixing it. And from the outside, this looks alarming. Let me paint you the exact scene. You know someone for years, maybe a decade. They were always the first to respond to your messages, always the first to ask how you were, always available. And then one day you send the message, you don't hear back for 2 days. When you do hear back, it's warm, kind even, but shorter than usual. Something is different, you can feel it, an unfamiliar stillness where there used to be rushing, a calm that wasn't there before. You see them at a gathering, they sit quietly in the corner, they don't work the room, but somehow people keep finding their way to that corner, one by one, like something is pulling them. Later, you hear someone say, I don't know what it is about them. I always feel seen when I talk to them, like they already know. You recognize this person, but you also realize you've never quite met this version of them before. You're watching someone in transition. You're watching someone crossing the threshold. The third phase, the destination Jung pointed everything toward, is what he called the self. Not the ego, not the persona, not the empath mask or the wounded child or the tireless giver. The whole, the integration of every fragment, the conscious and the unconscious, the light and the shadow, the wound and the wisdom. And at the precise threshold between the integration of the anima and the emergence of the self, the empath encounters something that Jungian scholars, drawing from his work and from the ancient sources he studied, have described as the Sophia archetype. Sophia, the Greek word, means at its simplest, wisdom. But not the wisdom of accumulated knowledge, not the wisdom of experience alone. This is the wisdom that Jung encountered directly in his own descent into the unconscious, documented in the most extraordinary psychological text he ever produced, the Red Book. In those visions that lasted years, feminine presences, ancient, fierce, tender, paradoxical, guided him through territory that would have destroyed a lesser psychological structure. He didn't conquer those figures. He listened to them. Now an important clarification that Jung's serious students would insist on. Jung himself never named the Sophia stage as a formal, discrete phase within his individuation model, but across his collected works, especially volumes 9, 11, and 14, and in the work of post-Jungian scholars like Marie-Louise von France, Edward Edinger, and Anne Belford Ulanov, Sophia emerges as the symbolic culmination of integrated wisdom, the lived arrival of the individuated self. She is not a label, she is a state. And she is older than psychology. She is the Shekinah in Jewish mysticism, the divine indwelling presence. She is Prajna in Buddhist tradition, transcendent wisdom, beyond all conceptual thought. She is Hagia Sophia in Orthodox Christianity, sacred intelligence embodied in stone. She is Shakti in the Hindu tradition, the living force that animates all things. Across every civilization, in every era, the same truth was encoded in different languages. There is a form of wisdom that is not learned from the outside. It is remembered from within. And the empath who reaches it has not arrived there by reading the right books. They have arrived by surviving the right darkness. You've been in a meeting with this person, maybe you work with them, maybe they're a friend of a friend. They say very little, while others are talking, performing, angling, they are simply present. And then at a critical moment, they say one sentence. Not dramatic, not calculated, just accurate. And the entire room shifts. The conversation that was spinning in circles suddenly has a center. The tension that everyone was dancing around suddenly has a name. And nobody can explain it. Someone will say afterward, how did they know to say exactly that? This is the Sophia stage empath in the world. Not performing wisdom, omitting it. This is why they become dangerous in silence. Not dangerous like a weapon, dangerous like a mirror you didn't know was there. The Sophia stage empath has completed, or is well along the road of completing, the integration Jung described. They have owned their shadow, they have claimed their authority, they have stopped performing their care and begun being it. And the result of that integration is what Jungian psychology calls coherence, a state the psyche emits like a frequency. Their nervous system, having been fully dismantled and consciously rebuilt, now carries a gravity that other nervous systems respond to involuntarily, not because the Sophia stage empath is doing anything, because of what they are. Jung described Sophia in his writings as existing at the boundary between worlds, between the visible and invisible, between the spoken and the known. The Sophia stage empath lives in that in-between territory. And within it, they develop what I can only describe as discernment born from darkness. The old empath felt everything and reacted, every emotional current swept them. They couldn't distinguish their own feelings from those they'd absorbed. They were, and this image is precise, a boat with no rudder on an ocean that never rested. The Sophia stage empath. They still feel everything. Every tremor, every undercurrent, every wound you've carried so long you've stopped noticing it. But now they are the ocean, not the boat. They feel the storm within them without becoming the storm. Think about the person in your life who unsettled certain people simply by being themselves. Not because they were aggressive, not because they were confrontational. Because they were still. They didn't need to fill silence. They didn't rush to ease your discomfort. They sat with you in your pain without performing concern, and somehow in that stillness, you found yourself saying things you had never said to anyone. Things you didn't even know were in you. That is not a social skill. That is the Sophia quality, witnessing so completely that truth has nowhere left to hide. Jung wrote that Sophia wounds and heals simultaneously. She wounds by seeing what you've hidden. She heals by seeing it without judgment. And this is precisely why she becomes dangerous to people who need to remain unseen. Narcissists feel it first. They enter expecting the usual dynamic, the accommodating, yielding, always available version of this empath they've relied on for years. And instead they find stillness. Something that sees them completely, the charm and the hollow center behind the charm, and neither recoils from it nor is fooled by it. The mirror won't distort itself anymore to make the reflection more comfortable. And for someone who has never been genuinely seen, this is the most disorienting experience of their life. How do you recognize this transformation in yourself or in someone you love? Here are the 5 unmistakable markers, and as you listen, notice how many feel not like new information, but like something you already knew but had never heard put into words. Sign 1, you have become comfortable with sacred isolation. Not loneliness. Loneliness is the wound, the ache of needing presence that isn't there. Sacred isolation is the sovereign, deliberate choice to be alone, because you have finally become someone whose company you genuinely enjoy. The old empath dreaded silence. Silence meant being alone with feelings they couldn't control, feelings they hadn't yet learned were theirs. The Sophia stage empath seeks silence, not to escape, to receive. Because that is where the signal is clearest, that is where the self speaks without interference. Sign 2, your anger has become precision. The unintegrated empath either suppresses rage entirely, years of swallowed, no-s accumulating into illness, depression, exhaustion, or releases it in floods that destroy everything in reach, including themselves. The Sophia stage empath's anger is different. It is quiet, surgical, exact. They say what needs to be said once clearly, without the 12-paragraph justification, without the excessive apology wrapped around it, and they do not repeat themselves. They do not need you to agree with what they said. They do not need you to understand it immediately. They said it because it was true. And their truth no longer requires your permission to exist. People around them call this cold. It is not cold. It is the sound of someone who has finally decided that their words are worth something. Sign 3, you have stopped performing empathy and started being it. This distinction is quiet, but it changes everything. There is a fundamental difference between the empath who rushes to comfort someone because their own anxiety cannot tolerate witnessing pain, and the Sophia stage empath who can sit with someone inside their darkness, completely, silently, without any urgency to resolve it. The first is still about the self, still about the empath's need to not be uncomfortable. The second is genuinely other-centered. Jung described this as the difference between sympathy and true compassion. Sympathy says, I cannot bear to see you suffering, so I will remove it. Compassion says, I can hold your suffering with you, you do not have to carry it alone. The Sophia stage empath does not absorb your pain to protect themselves from the discomfort of witnessing it. They witness fully without flinching, without inserting themselves into the center of it. And to the person being truly witnessed, for perhaps the first time in their lives, this feels like the most profound thing that has ever happened to them. Sign 4, you have become a myth maker. This is the most Jungian of all the signs, and the one people least expect. Jung wrote that the individual who has reached integration does not live by the myths handed down by a wounded world. They begin to generate new frameworks, new ways of naming what the culture around them has not yet found language for. Sophia stage empaths often find themselves in roles no one has a precise title for. They become the person people call before they call their therapist, They become the one who says the thing in the meeting that everyone was thinking, but no one dared name. They become the artist whose work makes people feel known in ways they hadn't realized they needed. They become the leader who transforms the culture of an organization not through strategy, but through presence. In the deepest Jungian sense, they become midwives to the future. Not the technological future. The psychic future, the one where human beings begin to remember that the interior world is not a distraction from real life. It is real life. Sign 5, and this is the one that will stay with you. You have stopped being afraid of being misunderstood. This is the final breakthrough, and it is the subtlest. The old empaths spent enormous energy, often most of their energy, making themselves legible, palatable, and safe to the people around them, softening their edges, qualifying their truths, shrinking into whatever shape the room seemed to need. The Sophia stage empath has made peace, genuine peace, not resentful resignation, with the fact that the fullest version of themselves will never be fully comprehensible to the people who needed them to stay small. And rather than spending their life's energy trying to be understood by those people, they direct it toward the ones who can actually receive what they have to give. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The Sophia stage empath has claimed that privilege. Quietly, completely, without waiting for permission. But we cannot end here. Because Jung would not let us end here. The greatest danger in the individuation process, the danger he named most urgently, is what he called ego inflation. The moment an expanding consciousness mistakes its own depth for superiority. And for the Sophia stage empath, this danger is uniquely subtle. Because when you have genuinely integrated your shadow, when you have genuinely claimed your authority, when people around you genuinely do respond to you with the kind of trust and openness that Sophia's presence invites, it is extraordinarily easy to quietly begin to feel that you see more clearly than others. And in a narrow, technical sense, perhaps you do. But the moment you use that sight to position yourself above another person, the Sophia energy has departed. What remains is the ego in disguise. Jung was unambiguous on this. The Sophia archetype heals through presence. She does not rule through it. True Sophia stage wisdom has a specific signature. You see what others cannot yet see, and you offer what you see as a gift without requiring them to receive it, without needing them to credit you for it, without positioning yourself as the one who delivered it. You do not need them to understand. You do not need them to thank you. You do not need to be recognized as the one who knew first. The dangerous silence of the Sophia stage empath is not power over others. It is power that is entirely self-contained. It transforms every space it enters, not through force, not through volume, not through performance, but through the simple, undeniable gravity of a soul that has finally come home to itself. Jung spent 40 years mapping the human psyche. And near the end of his life, he said something that I want to leave with you. He said, "The most important question anyone can ask is, am I related to something infinite or not?" For the empath who has traveled the full arc, from the aching, boundaryless openness of childhood, through the years of giving until there was nothing left to give, through the dark dissolution of the mask they built to survive, through the fire of confronting everything they buried in themselves, through the slow, difficult, extraordinary reconstruction of a self built not on other people's needs, but on their own truth. The answer to that question becomes undeniable. They are related to something infinite. And that infinite thing, that Sophia wisdom living at the core of every integrated human soul, does not shout. It does not perform, it does not demand, it does not need a single thing from the room it enters. It simply is. And in its being, it changes everything. If you are an empath in the middle of the dissolution right now, if you are in the dark night, if the mask has broken and you don't know who you are beneath it, if everything you built your identity around has stopped working and you are standing in the rubble of it, please hear this and hear it clearly. You are not falling apart. You are falling open. And what is waiting on the other side of that opening has been named by many people across many centuries. Jung called it the self, the Gnostics called it Sophia, the mystics across every tradition called it the divine. You might call it something simpler. You might call it the day you finally stopped being afraid of your own silence. That day is coming, and when it arrives, you won't need to announce it. The room will already know.